This video is intended to provide some information in regards to the 2022 reevaluation of property that was conducted in the city this particular year. The city normally conducts revaluations of properties every 5 years. However, because of the changes in the marketplace, the white hot marketplace for residential properties, the inequity in the tax rate and the equalization rate has required us to conduct that revaluation earlier than we had originally planned. The last revaluation of property occurred between 2019 and 2020. As you can see, we've had to do it again more quickly, and that's what we're here today. I'm going to use the PowerPoint presentation that I provided to the City Council on November 2nd of 2022. The information you're going to see in this presentation is as of this date, November 4th, 2022. The city's tax rate for the fall has not been set yet. That is still in the hands of the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration. And that requires the commissioner of the Department of Revenue Administration to sign off on the tax rate before tax bills can be sent out. So you'll be hearing more about that shortly. So without any further ado, I will move. This year, between 2021 and 2022, the city added approximately $40 million in new assessed valuation. What that means is new properties have been added, new buildings, new structures have been added to the city's tax rolls that were not there in 2021. We use the date of April 1st of every year. So what happens is any structure that has been added that is on the ground on April 1st, whether it's completely built or not, whether it's partially under construction, whatever is there, its value at that particular time is added to the tax rolls. This resulted in a 1.75% increase in the new property valuation in the city. When we put together the budget for 2022, we were estimating that it would only be 0.5%. As you can see, it's considerably higher than that. That's a good thing because that spreads the cost of the tax burden over a much larger, or I shouldn't say much larger, but a larger tax base than what existed in 2021. The change in evaluation from the city's properties was $2.2 billion last year, and that has increased to $2.7 billion this year, or just over a 20% increase. Equalization rate. The equalization rate is the comparison of the market rate compared to the property valuation for tax purposes. As I indicated, we go out on April 1st, and whatever new properties have been added to the tax rolls, we determine what the value of those are, and that gets added to the tax rolls. When those properties get added, they're added at 100% of what their actual cost is, or estimated cost is, at that particular time. Other properties revert back to the previous revaluation of property to determine what those rates were, and what those values were, I should say. The range acceptable to the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration is between 90 and 110%. What that means is that the value that we use to determine the tax burden for a particular property has to be within that range compared to the market rate, what it actually sells for in the market. If we're below 90% or above 110% of that, we have to conduct a revaluation of property. That is what has occurred here. We are well below the 90% we were before April 1st. And I'll show some examples of where we were in that particular factor. And that requires us to conduct a revaluation. So again, normally it's every 5 years, but if we fall outside of those parameters, we have to conduct a revaluation of property earlier. Market to tax value, the ratio overall, this is for both commercial, residential, and utilities, is 90.2% after the revaluation. Prior to that, it was 66.5%. So the date we look at for that, again, is April 1st. So on April 1st is when we freeze that, and we look at what's the value of properties on April 1st of 2022. Prior to that, it was 66.5%, again, for all properties. Since April 1st of 2022, and when the work was completed on the revaluation in October of this year, just a few weeks ago, the value of properties has continued to grow at such a rapid rate that we should be at 100%, but just in that short 6 months, we're down to 90%, because again, we froze the value of properties on April 1st of this year. That shows you how rapid the market has increased in terms of valuation. So we're on the very edge of having to conduct another evaluation of property, which could occur as early as 2024, worst case scenario. Now, fortunately, as of the last couple of weeks, the valuation of property, the market rate for property has gone down. The market is starting to change, it's starting to cool off. Hopefully that number of 90.2%, that ratio, gets closer to the 100% as we go into the next several months and into the next year. If that pattern that seems to be the direction that we're going on, if it stays in that direction, we won't have to conduct a revaluation of property in 2024. But obviously, if that changes, we'll have to reassess that at that particular time. This just shows the residential sector of the market, 90.8%, and its ratio was 68.2 prior to April 1st. Commercial is a totally different story. Commercial and industrial properties, the ratio is 97.1% after the revaluation, very close to where it needs to be, the 100%, which is the goal. Prior to that, the ratio was 72.5, below the standard set by the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration. This just kind of gives you a snapshot of the different types of residential property types. Overall, residential properties increased in valuation since the last revaluation by 27%. And it shows you the different types of house types. They all, in the marketplace, they grew by different rates. Now, this is not the only factor that goes into determining what the value of a particular piece of property is. How large that property is, the neighborhood that it is in, its age, other outbuildings that might be part of that, all go into that. So these are just some rough numbers about different house types by the increase in value that they have, again, increased since the last revaluation of property. This is an important piece here. When we take a look at this, this is going to tell the story about what is happening when the tax bill, what's going to happen when the tax bills come out. If you look at the red column, the residential sector, which is in red, traditionally has taken 55% of the tax burden in the city. And that has changed. If you look at the columns from 2017 to 2021, it stayed within 55%, within basically 1 percentage point all those years. If you look in 2022, after this, because of the market shift that has occurred, residential properties now are 59.9%, absorb 59.9% of the tax burden. If you look at the blue columns, that is the commercial industrial properties. Since 2017 to 2021, the commercial properties have about 40% of the tax burden in the city, 40% of the value of the city, tax value in the city. And that stayed pretty much within 1 percentage point, as you can see there through those years. In 2022, that dropped down to 36.2%. And then if you look at the green, those are utilities. And as you can see in 2022, there's about a 1%, almost a 1% drop in value there. So the residential sector of the economy, of the tax burden, the tax value of the city, is taking a much larger piece of that pie. That shift that has occurred is going to have a pretty dramatic impact on tax bills that are coming out this fall. This is just another graph, and this graph shows you in terms of the dollar amounts, the increase in property valuation in the city. The light blue is the gross taxable for all of the categories combined, and you can see the pattern from 2017, and then the reval that occurred between 2019 and 2020, and then once again the revaluation that occurred in 2022. And the darker blue, that shows the residential sector, the dollar amounts that have increased there in terms of valuation. The green is the commercial industrial, and you can see where that has the change that has occurred there, and then utilities are in the yellow. And this actually shows the numbers as they have changed from 2018, where the city was at just over $1.9 billion in assessed valuation. And that has increased in 2022 to $2.7 billion in value, the city's properties altogether. This chart, the purpose of this chart is to try to give you some examples of different properties and how they're actually affected. We use 2 residential properties, 2 houses, and then 2 commercial properties. It's important to remember commercial properties, apartment buildings that have more than 4 units are considered commercial property. Apartment buildings that have 3 or less are considered residential property. So in the example above, we're going to use house number 1. Now we're only going to use the city component of the tax rate here. The tax rate has 4 components. It has the municipal or city portion of the tax rate, which funds city services. Then there's the local education property tax component, which is the funding for the city's school district. And then there's the statewide education property tax, which is raised as part of the property tax bill, and that money remains in the city, at least it does right now, to help offset the cost of local education costs. And then there's the county portion of that. So there are 4 components. We're only talking about the city tax component. And the reason why is we have an estimated amount of what we think the tax rate is going to go from 2021 to 2022. Again, the tax rate has not been set by the Department of Revenue Administration yet. I do not know what the education property tax is going to be, or the county. Those numbers, the raw materials that have been submitted to the Department of Revenue Administration, but again, they have not set that. So we're only going to be talking about the city or the municipal portion of the tax rate, keeping in mind there are other components of that will affect this as well. So house number 1, in this case, house number 1 is just a random house we picked in the city, is worth $238,800 in 2021. In 2021, the municipal tax rate, or the city portion of the tax rate, was $10.06. That means for this property owner paid $2,402 to the city for the city portion of the tax burden. In 2022, after the revaluation of property, that same house is now worth $325,000 in market. With an estimated tax rate of $8.62, which is what we think it's going to be around that area. So the tax rate is going to go down from $10.06 down to $8.62 on or about. That would result in a $2,802 tax bill for that particular property, which is an increase of $399. This particular property increased 36% in value in the marketplace over that period of time from 2021 to 2022. So remember that $399 is only the municipal portion, an increase that only represents only the municipal portion of that. There may be additional, and there are likely to be additional increases for the education portion and the county portion, but I don't have those because those numbers have not been set. House number 2, valued at $442,900. In 2021, the tax burden for that particular property, for again just the city component of it alone, was $4,456. In 2022, that value increased to $593,800. If the tax rate is set at $8.62, that property owner would pay $5,119 in taxes for the city component only. That represents an increase of $663. That's a 34% increase in the value of that particular property. Now we compare the residential properties with the commercial properties, and you can see there's a dramatic difference. If we go way over to the right-hand column, those properties increased at much lower rates of increase compared to the commercial properties. That's why we see the tax burden shift that we had talked about when I showed the chart earlier. So commercial property number 1 is valued at just over $1 million here. The city component only, and again, this is only the city portion, not the local education, statewide education, property tax, or county portion, represented was $10,639. That was the tax bill, or part of the tax bill that represents the city portion. That property increased in value to just over $1.2 million, which would result in an increase in taxes that would equate to $10,857 or $217 more than what was paid in 2021. Commercial property number 2, a smaller property, was valued in 2021 at $322,000. The city tax bill that came out for that particular property was $3,246. Now, that's not the whole bill. Remember, because it does not include the education components of that or the county. That value increased to $357,500 in 2022. The tax bill for 2022, if the rate is $8.62 for the city component, is actually going to go down. That particular property owner of that commercial building is going to pay $165 less. And the reason why that is, again, is because the commercial properties are not growing at the same rate that residential properties are. That shift that has occurred in the marketplace shifts the burden, more of the burden from commercial and industrial properties to the residential property owners. And that's why you see the number of changes that you see here. These are going to be magnified when we have the local school and the statewide education property tax and the county tax on top of this. This scenario that has occurred here has not occurred anywhere near the degree in previous revaluations of property that we see going on this year. This is going to have a profound impact on people throughout the city, property owners. And it's not going to be the same for every property owner because of each property type has increased in value by different rates. And each property has unique qualities to it that others don't. So we wanted to get this information out to you so that folks could prepare for this prior to the tax bills coming out. The city will be sending a letter out to every property owner, and some of you, that's how you got the link to get to this particular presentation, but it'll be placed on the website prior to that. If you have questions or concerns about the actual valuation of your property and what it should be, you can contact our assessing department. If you have questions about your actual tax bill, the components of the tax bill, you can contact the tax collector's office, which is located in the city clerk's office. If you had any other questions about how this, the revaluation of property is conducted, or how the spending of the city occurs, I would suggest you contact the city manager's office. If you go to the city's website on the assessing page, this presentation is located, as well as other presentations from Vision Government Services, which actually does the process of the revaluation and goes into some of the details of that. Thank you for your time. And again, if you have any questions, my name is Sean Mulholland, the city manager for the city of Lebanon. Reach out to us and we will do the best we can to try to explain this to you. Thank you.